Right, another day in paradise on a sunny day. We've just run up the fabulous V8 Moto Guzzi, 1957, a member at the Belgium Grand Prix. I was riding Mondial, managed to finish second, not bad for a young'un, and that was the 250 class. Bill Lomas was riding this, and on the Friday night practice all the Moto Guzzi mechanics were in the next garage to us, and they didn't like the colour of the oil, so they set about changing the engine overnight. So the next day for the race, new engine, completely rebuilt, and lots of 4 cylinders, Giulia's, MVs, and Jeff Duke, 4 cylinder Giulia. Bill Lomas, great friend, V8, he rode the V8, so both of them were going that quick. It was actually timed at 168 miles an hour, 57, so that's about 53 years ago. So modern Grand Prix men, right, 50 odd years ago, half the cc that you lot have got. You're all racing thousands, this is 500, and you lot are only doing 20 miles an hour quicker. Tell Miller. But the reason was the streamlining. This we rode with the NSU and the Mondial. This really gave you 35, 40 miles an hour extra, and there were Moto Guzzis in a wind tunnel, so they got the fairing perfectly shaped, and they literally couldn't get high enough gear. It was so efficient, but very dangerous. Side winds. We had a lot of fatalities during racing. Nearly me in the Northwest 200. You're going along the straight and the wind catches and nearly blows you off the road. So the FIM in 57 banned full fairing, and they went to what they call the dolphin fairing. This is what you call a dolphin fairing, when the big fairing was superseded by a smaller fairing like that, which exposed the front wheel. So that's off our Rickman, so that was banned in 57. I should think it saved a lot of lives, because they were literally lethal. You need to be a brave man to race one of these, I can tell you. So Bill Lomas, Ken Kavanagh, Dickie Dale, they were the top jockeys for Moto Guzzi. And after 57, there was a big change, because Moto Guzzi, Giulia, Mondial, MV all decided to pull out of racing because it was getting too expensive, too dangerous. So 58, theoretically, there shouldn't have been no Giulias, no MVs, but MVs reneged on the deal, and they kept on racing while all the works riders disappeared. And it was one of the reasons why Miller packed up, because he had lost his ride on the Mondial, so it was either to go back private racing, private bikes, which were not quick enough, not reliable enough, and very expensive to run. So Giulia's, Guzzi's, Mondial pulled out, but MV kept on going, so riders like John Surtees had easy pickings, because the only works bike on the grid probably 30 mile an hour quicker than a Norton or an AJ. So wonderful opportunity. So V8, 5-speed gearbox. Miller's got the writing on the top here. Why does he write it on here? Because if you're at Goodwood and you're racing a Giulia, which is the wrong way round, and then you get on the Moto Guzzi, you don't want to be changing down when you should be changing up. So always reassuring to have that on there. This is the ignition on here, as you see, on off. Always reassuring to have it. Anyway, please, you've seen the Guzzi. Another thing with the Guzzi, with this here, we have problems with the cooling. The temperature leaps up quite dramatically. We've got a temperature gauge inside, but that leaps up. And the reason why that leaps up, because you need to be doing about 100 miles an hour to get a bit of draft through there to keep it cool. Miller going round here ain't quick enough, so we overcame that by a special coolant, ice coolant they call it. Very expensive. They use it in rally cars, so it's guaranteed to drop the temperature by 10 degrees, which is handy. It keeps it below the bloodline. We've got the bloodline on here at 70, and the warm-up temperature is, operational temperature is 50. So rev counter, as you see, rev it up sort of 7.5, 8. You see that how the twin front brake is coupled together, 2 cables into one. Quite clever. Not an easy bike to ride because the tank is enormous, and in the old days they all did it, but I don't know why they did it. They put monster tanks on them, and like that's about 5 gallons plus of fuel, and the top end weight of that when you start at a race was horrendous, especially in the TT. What they did later, of course, was make smaller tanks, stop after 2 laps, fill up and go, which would have been twice as quick as trying to carry 5 or 6 gallons from the off. So one of those things involved smaller petrol tanks, refuel, much better, much more efficient, especially when you see today in Formula 1 they can change a set of tires in about 2 seconds flat, you know. So 2 batteries hanging on the back end here. We have introduced electronic ignition on this, which is why it runs so well, runs so easy, because if you've got ordinary points, can you imagine 8 sets of points flying around at 8,000 RPM? Doesn't even bear thinking about. Whereas, so the problem with that is you don't get good combustion. Half the sparks ain't burning the fuel, so all of a sudden your carburation gets all up the chute, because if the carburetion's a bit rich or something and you're not burning the fuel, the next thing you're on 7 cylinders, then the next thing you're 6 cylinders, 5, 4. So if you've got tremendous ignition systems, it means you're burning the fuel, so your carburation is semi-corrective, as it were. It doesn't have to be 200% crack on. So that's a modern innovation, electronic ignition, but very, very important. Of course, in those days they didn't have it. Why is it got straight through pipes on? Well, if you do, it gives you a very flexible motor. It's not megaphone-itis, because if you put megaphones on here, you've got to do an awful lot of carburation testing and an awful lot of ignition testing. So really this was in its infancy. The next stage would be to put megaphones on, which extracts the fuel out of the cylinder, like all Grand Prix racing bikes. So there you are, V8 Moto Guzzi, pride of the museum really, and we'll put it to bed. And we've got another one to fire up here, which is probably quite exciting too, the Wooler behind you. So I'll get changed and we'll fire that one up. The 4-cylinder Wooler, quite a very advanced bike for its time. Wooler was a fantastic engineer. Flat 4, so each pot is 125cc, so 4 125s makes 500cc. Unit construction, 4-speed gearbox. As you look at the forks, telescopic forks, very much like Moto Guzzi, where there's no top yoke. Generally this stanchion comes right up through here and you've got a top yoke, but Moto Guzzi's, like that one, doesn't have a top yoke. I like the fairing where the tank stretches through to take in the headlight. Great styling. And the handlebar layout, have a look at the handlebars. The handlebar layout, all nice and neat, and your clock's in here, dual seat, and of course you come back to this. That's another nice touch I like, where the back number plate has been pressed out to take the number plate. We did that in trial bikes quite a long time ago on aluminium mudguards. press that area out so you've got a nice position for your number plate. Shaft drive, featherbed type frame. That's a nice bit of tube there, tapered and quite light gauge. Solex carburetors, car type carburetors, so it runs exceptionally smooth, exceptionally good, and a lovely bit of design. These are Burgess silencers, which were a marketing silencer in those days. Burgess were a great silencer company, and that's luckily an original Burgess. We'll probably drop onto the earlier one now, because this is his 1921 effort, so quite unique again. The guy was a brilliant engineer. You see the forks, suspension, quite unique. Front and back. I think that's the only bike that uses that suspension. Inline twin. They always had a bit of a weakness when the back pot never got as cool as the front cylinder, so you always had problems with the back cylinder heating up and possibly seizing. No electric lights, these are carbide lights, which are gas, so it gave quite a good light actually. And again, you can see his styling, where even in 1921 he had the tank round the front of the forks and big valance on the guards, which was excellent. On this one here, you've got your toolboxes on here, and a B&B carburetor. So lovely bike, slim, beautiful colours, and really for 1921, great bike. So we go back onto this one here. That's a photograph of the crank. If you have a look at that, that's the, when we had it to pieces, that was the crank. The barrel and the head, please. That's a spare cylinder head. Barrel rather, cylinder barrel. 125cc a pot, as we said. 250 a side, 500 overall. Cylinder head, again, conventional valves, just twin valve, and inlet ports, exhausts on that side. Nice castings. He actually did quite a bit of business with the RAF, selling the engines for drones and early prototype planes. I remember when we were gathering up bits, we went down to Devon, and there was a Wooler enthusiast there who specialised in the aircraft engines, and I remember going into the garden and he had a rig set up with a big prop on it, and he fired up the engine, and this prop nearly took me and the whole lot off into the orchard, as it were. So big help. We were lucky, most of the engine bits are all interchangeable, so it was great help when we were building it that we got quite a bit of information from it. This appeared at Earl's Court Show 1955. It was a sensation, and Wooler Company, they were a bit like Miller, like one was enough, two was too many, and I think he got an order from Argentina for 100 of these, and he nearly dropped dead, and never really went into production. I think there's about probably 8 in the world that survive. This is probably the only running one. It's definitely the only one that runs half sensible. So Jim's going to fire it up. I'll get a helmet on and we'll run it around the car park here, let you hear what a lovely bike it is. Some of the modern manufacturers could take a few tips here. So we'll show you how the stand works. You just pull it over, that's
So load it up and then you stop this.
so what you do here, right? So you're off the stand there, so you bank it over like that. You pull that down like that, you pull that up like that, and you're on the centre stand. So you lot want to get your bike converted to that.
No lifting.
So Jim will fire it up, I'll get a helmet on it, and then we'll run it around a little bit, and then we'll have a look at the beam engine. up in the engine department, sectional engines, I like this area very much because it's so interesting. Probably, believe it or not, out of all that lot, the most technically interesting is 1903. You didn't hear me. 1903. That's 117 years old. There's two cylinders, but one of them is a supercharged piston. So it supercharges the gases into one side. You have camshaft, face cam shaft drive, and 4 valve. 117 years ago. 117 years ago, supercharged, 4 valve, unbelievable. We don't really know the name of the manufacturer, but we feel it's Renault because in the early days, Renault were winning all the races on the continent, car racing and so forth, in front of the Mercedes because they had the supercharged sorted out. So there you go, that's the supercharged 1903 4-valve. You can certainly get the idea of the principle if you have a look at this engine here. This is early sort of supercharging too. What they call this the split single. So what really happens, you charge up this cylinder and that compresses the fuel higher compression ratio for the combustion on this piston. So that is really the supercharged piston firing a big capacity of fuel over into the expansion chamber. So we go back to the Wooler. We spoke about the beam Wooler engine. This is it here. That's the sort of principle there where you've got 4 pistons at the top, con rods, and then this is the flywheel here. A bit of a Mickey Mouse idea because you've got 1, 2, 3 big ends for starters, you know. And if you look closely at this one here, around this side, if you look in there, you'll see it's been welded up. So it's been welded here. So this engine, it came from Woolers, obviously had a disaster in its life when it had to be welded back up again when that probably threw a rod and broke the crankcases. So they put it in a couple of bikes which were quite interesting. Unfortunately, Miller never been able to find one, but at least we've got the engine, the beam engine, very much like steam engines, you know, where they get these horizontal pistons working back and forward. So interesting bit of tack about 1952, 51, 52. Quite small induction tracks on it. I would like to see those a lot bigger because that's 250 and that's 250. So a bit like this one here where you can see that's the cylinder off the one we were just doing outside. 125, 125, and that pops on there like that. And you've got more or less, you can see there the similarity of the two engines. So very lucky to have that in the museum. That's the great man himself there, and John Wooler, that's him, and that's the beam principle. So great man, great inventor, great innovator, always liked something different. So that's the story of the Wooler. Another day in paradise.